As Donald Trump continues to try to cover up his dark and sickening past, his dirty deal with Ghislaine Maxwell, moving her from the Tallahassee prison to the facility at Camp Bryan in Texas, is causing massive nuclear level issues at the female prison system in both Tallahassee and at Camp Bryan in Texas. So in Texas, it's a minimum security facility where a lot of the women inmates have their children visit them. They do picnics on the weekend. And a lot of these inmates right now are terrified that there is a convicted sex trafficker who could be exposed to their children. And again, Donald Trump had to get a special waiver for Ghislaine Maxwell in order to get to that Camp Bryan facility in Texas. It's like the most sought after facility for minimum risk inmates. I'll talk more about some of the issues we're seeing right there as part of Donald Trump's dirty deal. Then when we talk about Tallahassee, that's for some of the worst convicted criminals like Ghislaine Maxwell, who was convicted of sex trafficking and sentenced to more than 20 years. And in Tallahassee, we're seeing some of the female prisoners basically revolt against the Bureau of Prisons, not wanting to follow orders and directions and just thinking that this entire system is rigged against them because they're seeing somebody who has money like a Ghislaine Maxwell, someone whose background and privilege has allowed them to do something that none of those women are ever able to do, which is to switch facilities. And there's a cohesive kind of ebb and flow that takes place in a facility like that from the Bureau of Prisons that's been severely disrupted there in Tallahassee. And they're having a very difficult time keeping control of the inmates there now, I'm learning, as a result of this transfer by Ghislaine. Now, going to what's going on in Camp Bryan in Texas, as I said, it's a minimum security facility. MeidasTouch Network was one of the first groups to do reporting. You may remember we had Joe Jarowski on before anyone was talking about the conditions at Camp Bryan. We talked about the puppy program they have there because the facility in Bryan, Texas, that's on the Texas A&M campus. I mean, it's right by Texas A&M. So there's a lot of exchange, educational exchange, as part of a restorative justice program from the college town and the women who are at the Camp Bryan facility. So they have nursing programs. They have programs where the college students work with the female inmates to help raise puppies together and then turn over the puppies or gift the puppies to persons with disabilities. And then again, because it's a minimum security facility, there's lots of children that are around there. So Donald Trump has just unleashed a convicted sex trafficker near a college campus in a facility where there's lots of children who visit on the weekend. And now the other inmates who are there are basically being told, look, you just got to ignore her. Look the other way, don't have any contact with her or communication with her. And they're like, it's kind of hard because, she's walking around and roving. One of the things to know as well, the status that Ghislaine Maxwell has is a status that would potentially allow you to just walk out of the facility and go into the community. Now, her lawyer denies that she has the ability to do that. But at least the status that she has, the designation, at least as it relates to other female prisoners, would allow that to happen at Camp Bryan, again, because it's minimum security, restorative justice, working with the community. So here's the report from CNN. Ghislaine Maxwell's arrival at Texas prison camp sparks tension and restrictions. And it talks about she's creating massive problems in this minimum security all-female unit facility. And then it talks about how, in this facility that are largely nonviolent white-collar offenders, they've been warned about her being there. They've been told to exercise discretion. Someone by the name of San Mangle, a prison consultant who works with clients at that prison camp, said she's radioactive. She's not making any friends. Nobody's going to rock the boat there. They want to serve the remainder of their sentences with whatever modicum of comfort Bryant provides. It goes on to say, at this point, nobody wants to even be anywhere near her. They're terrified that she can harm their prison sentences there. And then the article goes on to talk about the various benefits that people have at that system. Look, the Trump regime doesn't want to talk about this at all. They brought Kash Patel on, who has the audacity to say that the real scandal everybody needs to focus on is some 2016 Russia conspiracy that they're pushing. Here, let's play this clip.
Here's the beauty of it, Sean. You don't have to trust me or trust you. That's all. Everything you recited, the summary you just gave, is years of excavating documents that these deep state actors held and buried and documented their own corruption because they were arrogant enough to think no one would ever find it, that Donald Trump would never become president and appoint a cabinet that would go in and investigate this matter thoroughly. And when you start connecting the dots, here's what I learned, Sean, when I ran the Russiagate investigation. As bad as the crime is, the corruption cover-up from senior government officials who are sworn to uphold their duty.
That's as they're literally covering up the Epstein files. I want to bring in Harry Litman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Talking Fed podcast, and the Talking Fed Substack. Harry, when Trump goes and does something like this, giving this deal to Ghislaine, it has a ripple effect across the criminal justice system as well. I mean, you think about, will victims of crimes reach out to the DOJ in the future, right? Like, if you're protecting the sex trafficker and hurting the victims, not listening to the victims, isn't that going to result in more sex trafficking and less victims coming forward? What do you make of all of this, Harry?
Yeah, so first, by the way, quite some dots you've connected there, Ben, from Ghislaine to Kash Patel. But the short answer is, of course it will. And that's one of the constituencies. You've named the inmates themselves, but victims are also really up in arms at this rank preferred treatment, while at the same time treating victims as they see it with callousness and indifference. They're not trying to get to the bottom of anything. They're just trying to keep Trump free from the kind of fallout from the whole deal. But they did not contemplate what would happen at this minimum security prison. First, I want to say, you hear a lot about Club Fed and the like. There are such prisons in the overall federal system. It's a good thing to have some places where people who have shown themselves deserving can have programs, prepare to return to the community, but it's a two-part process. First, only certain crimes can be eligible, and then you have to have a whole record of behavior. Maxwell wouldn't have even come up in the first place because her crime was too serious to even permit consideration of this reassignment. And it had to be, as you mentioned, that the Bureau of Prisons itself said, we will waive it. Now, we know very clearly it wasn't the head of the BOP who woke up one day and said it's time to give Ghislaine Maxwell a break, and probably figured what would happen. And there are many accounts. The CNN is quite well done, but radioactive is the word. And what makes these kinds of facilities either advantageous to the U.S.'s interest, that you don't want lockdowns where you don't need them. You don't want prisoners just incapacitated. You want them to be able to do this thing. But now it's a complete mess. If you've been to these prisons, there really is liberty of movement and operation. And she comes in, and everyone, apparently to a person, is, doesn't want to have anything to do with it. It's not just parents of children, but somehow it's not going to be a good day if you're seen hanging out with Ghislaine Maxwell. It could be that other prisoners are suspicious, or it could be that you're worried that right now, the administration and Todd Blanche have been very clear. We're the ones who talk to Ghislaine Maxwell. When I talked to her, didn't even take apparently an FBI agent, just an audio tape. So everybody is like, man, do I not need this? Now, in the prison system, Ben, the way it would work is you solve these problems as best you can comprehensively. It wouldn't be, oh, well, poor Ghislaine Maxwell, nobody's coming up to her. It would be, we got a problem here, and it's obvious what we have to do. We have to take this one prisoner out of general population. Sometimes you wind up putting prisoners who are at some risk in isolation just because you got to keep them from the other prisoners, even though they complain bitterly. Why are you doing this to me? In a similar way, the obvious thing that BOP has to do here is remove her from the population and put her back. But of course, that pits all the penological goals, not just general, but just maintaining good, orderly prison life in this place that has not been a problem prison to date in the system, maintaining it. And you have, on the other hand, how much will, all the way up to the Deputy Attorney General, even the Attorney General, even the President of the United States say, we don't care what happens in that prison. We don't care who walks out. We don't care who says what. We don't even care if there's unrest for the personal reasons. And we won't tell you all about it because it's just the sweetheart talk that she provided to Todd Blanche. She is staying there. So it's now no longer a question of telling BOP folks, I know the rules don't permit it because of her level of crime. It's now, I know she's creating bedlam and is radioactive in your system. Get used to it. I mean, that's just completely ignoring everything that Bureau of Prisons has to do with their whole population. So I doubt they contemplated the ferocity of the pushback, the notion of her being radioactive, and the dimensions of it, not simply obvious enough victims, not simply, all those citizens out there thinking that she's getting a sweetheart deal, but the prison itself. It's a mess entirely of their own making. And given the status she now enjoys, it's not clear that they can just undo it. And yet every time you have a new round of people saying this, the focus gets put on what? First and foremost, the sweetheart treatment at the personal hands of the Deputy Attorney General, and what a rank kind of violation or just ignoring of the whole system of imprisoning folks and penological objectives, and everything takes not just a back seat, but gets thrown out of the car in order to give Ghislaine Maxwell this preferential treatment, and people know it and they're pissed.
That's why when in our system, there is the grand jury, then there's an indictment, then there is a trial. If it goes through its logical conclusion, then if a jury convicts beyond a reasonable doubt, then there is a sentencing process where there are guidelines, and it's taken very, very, every aspect, and you've dealt with sentencing guidelines. There's complex formulas behind it. The federal judge takes all these different factors into account. And it's one of the most important roles of a judge. So when a judge looks at the facts of Ghislaine's case, goes through, finds Ghislaine's a liar, finds the conduct to be conscious, shocking crimes, minors, all of those create, add points, if you will, to say, it's this facility, it's this sentence, it's this time, and here's why we're doing it. And we have developed this system because we've recognized that if you break it then, to your point, the penological objectives and all of these things are broken. And when it's broken, more crime is created and you have a lawless society. So I'll give you the final word, Harry, but what this move adds up, it's not simply just a benefit to Ghislaine Maxwell rewarding the sex trafficker. The way we understand criminal justice and the way scholars study it, the way we've learned about it and teach about it in law school, it's now Trump helping all of the future sex traffickers out there and all of the future people looking to engage in horrific crimes who may who may go, you know what? All I got to do is if I'm rich or if I could, I'll weasel a deal together and I'll be okay. And maybe I'll end up in Camp Bryan. So let me give you the final word there, because it shatters the system that is built on that is built on these pillars.
Yeah, so as a former DOJ guy, that is the way I look at it. There's not just a system, there's an accompanying whole personnel of expertise. It's not, you can't walk in tomorrow and know how to run a prison camp. People who have tried it have been encountered with, disaster. And so certainly the people at that camp know that, they didn't give a second's thought to what they now have on their hands and have to deal with every day. So, and there are ways in which this is happening really throughout the system, throughout the Department of Justice. The people who are best at fill in the blanks, voting rights, civil rights, even federal programs. This is now 50% of them are just gone. So the brain drain is cataclysmic, but it extends to something like this. If everything goes well in a federal prison system, we don't hear about these things, and they're generally, run better. But that's because you should see the BOP manual, or I've spoken to folks at BOP about specific placements and stuff. It is a considered process, and instead they've just had this radioactive lump dumped in the middle of an open air prison, and it ain't going to get better. And I really think that what the head of the system would say, can we move for, maybe there's another minimum prison somewhere, but I think there will be, it's the obvious thing you need to do. And I think the pushback will be quite strong, but it will again pit political interests of Donald Trump against the professional, interests of the people who run the federal prison system. And they're not amateurs and they're not political types. They have a job to do. They know how to do it. Todd Blanche does not.
There he is, Harry Litman from Talking Feds YouTube, Talking Feds podcast, and Talking Feds Substack. Great to see you as always, Harry. Everybody subscribe to Talking Feds on YouTube and all those other platforms.
Likewise. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.